Hey everyone, welcome back to the Insight Podcast. I'm your host Seth, the CMO at Site, and I'm joined by my co-host Mikey, the CEO at Site. Today's episode is all about helping big e-commerce stores get bigger. In the past, we focused on strategies for smaller businesses and how to get the best out of a limited budget. But today we're shifting gears and diving into scaling strategies for established e-commerce stores looking to take their growth to the next level. If you're already seeing solid sales but want to amplify your success, this episode is for you. Let's dive right in. So how can the big guys get bigger?
I think just in terms of maybe if we start, what is big guys? I think the big guys usually fulfill both of these things. One is they're big in terms of revenue. So they're already doing lots of revenue. That's, I'd say, the most important criteria as what we're talking about today in terms of big. And secondly, it's not always 100% of the case, but most often it is. Big guys often have many SKUs. So they got lots of products, they're selling lots of different things. And that's not always how they got big, but often how they got big. And today we're going to talk about how they can get even bigger.
Yeah, fantastic. Maybe we can even put a set number. Like, what would you define as, if you're generating this much revenue in a month, you are then considered in this big audience?
That's a good point. Yeah. So, and I'll say, obviously, big is a great point. Big is relative. And I'll say, in order to use the strategies that we're going to talk today, our definition of big is locally in South Africa is probably R1 million a month in revenue. And globally, it's probably about $1 million in revenue. Like, those numbers do translate quite well in terms of these strategies. What is big in each place?
Okay, fantastic. So the big boys, you better be listening.
So this is probably the most obvious and the one most often not used, I would say, is spend more. And this is as follows. The beauty of paid media is paid media, when scaled correctly, typically can scale linearly. Usually, if people are not scaling linearly, meaning that if they're putting more money into their paid media and they're not getting linear returns, either they're not scaling correctly, and sometimes in the edge case, that market is maxed out, but usually in the big cases, that's not the case. So the easiest way to go from 1 million to 2 million is actually spending more money, but scaling in the right timing, in the right proportion. Too many times guys are, well, what do I do next? My Google's killing it. My Meta is killing it. Let me try Twitter or X or Pinterest. Where the easier route and the quicker route to success is, these platforms are killing it. How do I juice these platforms more?
Yeah. And then I think even further than that is, where are these platforms sending it and where can I juice it there? And that's where we can kind of chat a little bit about the CRO, your conversion rate optimization. You're generating the best traffic in the world. They're coming and they're converting. How can you convert more of them? And that's when you go into your conversion rate optimization. You'll install something like Hotjar on your site. You'll spend hours upon hours analyzing, or you'll hire someone to analyze why people are rage clicking, why people aren't converting, and you'll increase that conversion rate, and that will just make everything more effective. And then you can go back to the traffic and say, I need more traffic. And you can do this cycle, so on and so forth, until you've reached your plateau, and then you've made it to the top, get a medal.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I'd say, like, step 2 is you've maxed out paid media, or you maxed out the paid media channels that are working. The biggest thing you still can do to translate or move the needle is, as you mentioned, get better conversion rate. It's far cheaper to get more revenue by getting a better conversion rate than it is by increasing spend. So although spend is the easiest to do, the biggest lever at your disposal is CRO, or improving conversion rate.
Yeah. And what's like, when you actually take the time and effort to go and do that, what's great is that these platforms actually reward you for it. For example, like when you're running Google Ads, if your click-through rate is high and it gets higher, then you're spending less money on ads, getting better quality traffic, and Google's rewarding you because you're relevant, and they want all of the searches to be as relevant as possible. So they'll reward you for being relevant to the client. And, it's just a win from Google's side, and Google reward you. So you'll win from Google, and spend less, make more, and everyone's more happy. with my terrible English there. Everyone's more happy.
And let's give guys as much wins or as much tactics as possible. Go through the next, I'll say, like the whole range quickly, and then we can kind of cycle back and unpack them if need be. So I think the next thing for big stores is audiences. Max out your audiences. The biggest advantage big stores have over small stores is that they've typically acquired extremely powerful transactional audiences. And these are people that have either followed them on Facebook, even better, come to the site and abandoned. And even the guys that are high up in the funnel come to the site and not abandoned, but people that have had some interaction with the brand and shown some brand affinity. That's such a powerful thing when marketing, whether you do bid adjustments on Google or use that for Facebook audiences. Using audiences, super powerful. Next one I'll quickly just jump to is feed optimizations. Feed optimizations in Google is the new Google optimization. In the old days, you lived in keyword optimization. You lived in optimizing your Google ads. Now, to optimize Google ads, you're not actually optimizing Google ads, you're actually optimizing the feed. And I think there's so many wins that guys don't get, but they could get if they spend more time in feed optimization, particularly when the store is big. So a small change can make a drastic end result.
And maybe let's talk about some of those individual, like, let's just give a few examples of what are those little wins.
So from the feed optimization.
Yeah, from the feed optimization, like pricing, obviously, the titles, give a few more.
Yeah. So I think so few guys are able to get GTINs. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's really the Google's identifier what a product is. And having a GTIN number is extremely powerful because it almost does the feed optimization for you. It tells Google that this product, which is a blue umbrella, should also come up for this search term, which is a Gucci blue umbrella if it's a Gucci umbrella. And it should also come up for sunshade. So a GTIN essentially guides Google in terms of all the search terms that a product should come up for. If you don't have GTIN numbers, which most stores don't do, you're left to almost solve for that manually. And that's exactly as you're saying, getting the titles correct, getting the descriptions correct, ensuring that the search terms that you want to appear for are actually displayed in your product. And I think one of the easiest solves that guys don't do is when they're selling a branded product. So let's say they're selling a Gucci handbag, and let's say they're the Gucci store themselves. This mostly often happens with the actual brand custodian. Often because it's a Gucci store, they'll say handbag or blue handbag or whatever the brand name of the model of the name of the handbag is. It's so important to actually insert Gucci in there to kind of guide Google guide search to actually get that search. So just in terms of descriptors and keywords, that's where they go in shopping optimization. So I think that's where a portion of the wins are to be had.
Yeah, especially when you are a big store, you've spent so much money, and especially a big brand as well, you've spent so much money teaching and educating the public about who you are, what you do. You might as well take full advantage of that in the final go. You don't go after bag. Everyone's got a bag, but we've got Gucci bags, really segment and focus. Yeah.
100%. And I think the last one I have, which is, I'm going straight to the point today, is the last two. So second last is contradictory to the first point in terms of just increasing spend is platforms. So let's say you have done that. You've already increased spend. You've already got all the juice you have from conversion optimization. What's next? There are so many channels that guys aren't exploring that are so similar to what they're already doing. So I know we've spoken about this in the previous episode, but if you're doing Meta or Facebook and Insta ads, you should probably try TikTok ads. If you're doing Google, you should probably try Bing. If you're, what's another good analogy? If you're doing, even let's put in the social bucket, Meta and TikTok, you should probably even try X. There's so many niche channels that no one's playing with that they should play with. Exactly. Test small and then scale big.
Yeah, something I do, like even with Sites account, because I can call it relatively big, is that I've got like a little checklist that I have each week, and I'll just go, this week I'm testing this, and then I'll go test out 100 things, because it's difficult to consistently come up with ways that you can test. So I actually I dedicate a bit of time each week, and I'll go, okay, this week I'm going to go and test this, And then it actually allows me to go and because otherwise, if you're just like, I need to go test more, you actually don't know what you need to test more because you don't really have a clear overview of what's worked and what hasn't. So write a list, say I need to test this out, and then go test it, or tell your team to go test it.
And last thing we have today, Sethala, is
fine.
I think we guys got wrong, and maybe where they struggle to scale is cold. So last week we did an episode on how should small stores compete with big stores. And the advice was almost to live in your warm audiences and go after transactional bottom of funnel search. For large stores, in order to grow, you'd only be spending money on the guys that are going to come back anyway, most likely. So you need to go after cold search that doesn't have your brand affinity. So again, this is like, I wouldn't say your last measure, but the thing that you really got to do at some stage to scale. So really to go after the cold audiences that have never heard of you and pay close attention to your new visitor and your new purchase rate versus your existing purchase rate. Often people think they're growing because their store is getting bigger over time because their existing purchases are coming back, and that existing purchase number stays as a percentage but grows as a quantum. In order to grow quicker, what you need to do is get cold people through the funnel that have never purchased before, get them to make their first purchase, and then they'll second and third and fourth and fifth purchase will reward you down the line.
Mm. Maybe let's give the audience a little bit of an exact ratio. What should your new audience compared to your existing clientele? What should that ratio be?
So I think an accurate benchmark, which we see mostly, and this excludes stores that have an inherently repurchase rate. So if you're selling contact lenses, this probably doesn't apply to you. But if you're selling mostly one-off items, so clothes where they don't need an item every month to fulfill the next order, 15% is quite an accurate number to aim for. So if you're below that, you're probably not doing a good enough job on reconverting your past customers. If you're doing more than that, you're probably not doing a good enough job of getting new guys in the funnel.
Just going back to when we spoke about our audiences, I think I've seen this in big accounts time and time again. And honestly, it's the e-commerce podcast at this point, because I've seen so many big accounts where I'm like, do you guys do emailers? They say, no, we don't do emailers. But and every e-commerce store, just in the way that it's set up, you collect an email address. If someone sets up an account, they collect an email address. If you are not doing event-based emailers, forget about the newsletters. They can just sit there. Please go do an event-based emailer, especially when you've got a big store and you've got the big budget. Please, it's just going to make you more money.
What was a slap in my face and like a reminder to get more aggressive on email for e-commerce was I was listening to one, he's quite famous in the e-commerce world, one like e-commerce influencer. And it was a couple of years ago on Black Friday, he was saying that he was giving his Black Friday playbook. And they were saying that they do 7 mails a day. So I'm not even talking about event-based mailers, even bulk mails. They're doing 7 mails a day per person over that period. And the mad thing is that people are often terrified about sending too much email. There's almost no such thing. And again, as you mentioned, because you want to do event-based mail, it's very seldom seen as spam. It's very seldom seen as unwanted mail. It's personalized mail. So as much as you can do of that, the better.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of the Insight Podcast. I hope now you can go and make your store bigger. Remember, you got to live in the nitty-gritty details, especially when you're dealing with large volumes and revenue. Every single little thing can be optimized. And once you feel like that one's been optimized to the fullest, move on to the next. You have to live in the details when it comes to the bigger stuff. Go after your cold audiences and get more and more people to know about your brand, but then also really focus on, after they've known about your brand, then convert them into a client. Really focus on the customer journey there, how they interact with your site. And yeah, that's about it. I'll catch you next week.